Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
We're very honored and pleased to have as our guest today the senior senator from the state of Idaho, United States Senator James A. McClure. And I think Senator McClure holds the record for over the 18 years being on this program more than any other guest. Our guest resides in McCall, Idaho, and he is not serving in the United States Senate between sessions. He is an attorney. He served 3 terms as a state senator in the state of Idaho. He was elected to the United States House in 1966 and re-elected in 68 and 70, and he was elected to the United States Senate in 1972 and has continued to serve in the U.S. Senate since that time. Our senator is also the ranking minority member of the United States Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. He is a member of the Appropriations Committee. He also serves on Rules and Administration, and he serves on a number of subcommittees, including being the ranking minority member of the Interior and Related Agencies Subcommittee. Senator McClure, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on our program.
Tony, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here again.
I'm very happy to have 2 attorneys in the state of Idaho who are regular panel members to join in questioning our guests today, Janelle Burke and Glenn Walker. And I shall ask Janelle Burke to commence the questioning.
Senator McClure, welcome to our program. It's a privilege to have you here. One of the problems that's facing the United States today is a balanced budget while maintaining a healthy economy. That promises to be a significant issue in the 1990s. What measures do you favor in order to balance the budget, or what measures do you favor in order to keep us with a healthy economy?
Well, first of all, I agree with you that this will be a major issue. As a matter of fact, it ought to be the major domestic issue. It covers a whole lot of other issues as well in terms of how you set priorities and what those priorities ought to be. But fundamentally, you cannot have a strong, vibrant economy for a long period of time when you spend more than you have. You can't do it. I can't do it. This state of Idaho can't do it. The city of Coeur d'Alene can't do it. Kootenai can't do it. Why should the federal government do it? Or why should we believe that they can? And I think really we crossed that bridge about 1980, and the American public in the 1980 election said we want to stop that old idea of deficit spending. In spite of that, it has grown, the deficit, the national debt has grown since 1980. We now have a national debt ceiling of $1.122 billion. I think that's an obscene figure, and it's an indictment of the failure of the Congress. I favor a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States, not because it will solve all the problems, but I think it makes it easier for those of us who want to reduce federal spending and tougher for those who continue to want to spend more than we have. But I think the only one sure answer is for the American public to get up and scream. You know, if they'd scream as much about spending more money than they have as they do about proposed congressional pay raises, we'd have balanced the budget a long time ago, because the members of Congress would have heard that the American public wasn't any longer going to tolerate that kind of fiscal mismanagement. Other than that, there are some measures that we can take. The Gramm-Rudman-Hollings bill is not a perfect vehicle, but it's helping. We can revise and strengthen it. We can take Social Security off budget so we don't use their trust fund to cover up other spending. A number of specific things that we can do, but all of them directed towards the single goal of making Congress be more responsible than they are now. Incidentally, I got to stress this. The President of the United States is not responsible for the deficit. As I read the Constitution, the purse string is kept in the hands of the Congress, and it's Congress that spends money.
Glenn Walker.
Well, Senator, it's good to have you here. I echo that. You talked about people screaming about the pay raise. We started out the congressional year with something that people had a great deal to scream about, and the people's voice was heard. The pay raise was voted down. And we ended up the year with another pay raise, but a little bit more acceptable, I guess. And in between the two, what do you think was a major accomplishment of this congressional session?
Well, this last session was really, I have difficulty seeing real large achievements. They're not those standout landmark pieces of legislation. But I think the achievement was that we at least finished the year having met the targets on deficit reduction. As modest as they are and as difficult as they are to achieve, we did further restrain the growth of federal spending so that the deficit for this fiscal year is smaller than the deficit of the last fiscal year. That's progress. At least we're moving in the right direction. I think we also did one other thing that is important in the balance. We stayed very steady with respect to our posture towards the Soviet bloc. Federal support for defense posture has been maintained at significant levels that keep pressure on for the accommodations that we're now beginning to see from the Soviet Union and their allies. So if I had to summarize two big things, I would think that those are the two most significant.
Well, let me ask you something before Tony gets a chance. I gotta talk to you about the great outbreaks of democracy in Eastern Europe. Do you think that the United States is taking the right posture in term as we watch? Could there be more that we do to try to help these outbreaks of democracy?
Well, I think what we did that helped bring that was keep steady pressure on the Soviet Union and its ideology, making certain that they never had free opportunity to go in the other direction. There are a whole lot of things we could point to. The Berlin Wall didn't come down on November 9th. It came down because of something that had been happening for over 40 years. Steady pressure on their system that didn't allow them to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, that demonstrated that indeed, even though we were not necessarily managing our economy well, theirs was doing much less. That said that even though you can put up massive rockets with nuclear warheads aimed at the United States and you can bring about some kind of a nuclear stalemate, you can't win even though you have massive superiority in conventional forces. We're going to invest in technology that makes conventional forces, conventional weapons smarter. To stop and think for a moment what we can do with cruise missiles when we don't have to necessarily invade their territory but stand off a long ways and send a cruise missile in there with very, very great accuracy over hundreds of miles. Those developments on our side put a great deal of pressure on their system to produce the results they hope to get, and I think overall that produced the changes that are taking place, it demonstrated the bankruptcy of their system. They can't dominate militarily and they can't succeed economically. And so changes are occurring, and I think that's the thing we had to do and we must continue to do to encourage that change. I think we have to be willing to look at whatever kind of actions that we can take to support fledgling democracies and the moves towards a free economic capitalism. We can't just go in there with buckets of money. First of all, we don't have it, and secondly, that's not precisely what they need. But they do need to have some encouragement and some assistance in ways that we can do. We can help the Polish government, for example, in creating a banking system in their own country that's capable of exchanging money and balances and carrying on business transactions. They can't do that now. There are a whole lot of things like that we can do that doesn't require the expenditure of massive sums of money, which we don't have, but still gives them a concrete reason to believe that we are interested in their progress, as indeed we are.
Senator McClure is so correct. Glenn Walker just got it before I could. The question, I really want to deal with that. Just one follow-up in that area. Many of us feel that this is a great hour for democracy, and you've certainly been indicating that. Also, some of us have observed President Bush in this matter that he's using a cautious approach, which seems rather wise in this case, because he is obviously being supportive of the changes coming. But is it not correct and that by being cautious and giving support but not appearing to intervene, that actually helps those who are involved with liberation? In other words, it's not an excuse for the old guard to use certain excuses to say the United States is intervening too much.
I think, unlike the change that you see occurring in the Soviet Union, which is change from the top down, it's change imposed or permitted at the top, but it's spreading down through the system. The change that's happening in Germany, in Czechoslovakia, and Hungary are changes from the bottom up. Now, I don't think our government can really go in and say to the people of Czechoslovakia, we're on your side. Those changes come from them, from within themselves. We don't need to take the same kind of approach to the Czech government because that's coming from the people of Czechoslovakia. Same thing was true with respect to Poland, kind of a special case in lots of respects because they were kind of the leaders in the process. But I do agree that President Bush is responding properly. A lot of people think he's more cautious than he is because he is the kind of man who sits in a meeting with a pad on his knee and he listens to the discussion all around him, and he may ask a question or make a comment from time to time throughout the conversation, but he doesn't announce decisions at the beginning of the meeting. He waits until everybody's had their say, and then he announces a decision at the end of the meeting. Some people say that's not being a leader, that's not being assertive. I think that's the right kind of leadership in a democracy that listens to the input of other people and then makes a decision on the basis of the best advice and knowledge we have. And so as these tremendously dynamic events are occurring in Eastern Europe, he listens to that. He gets advice from people. He considers the alternatives, and at the end of the process says what it is we're going to do. I think he's approaching it exactly right.
I want to switch to one other subject, and I'll go back to the panel. That's something here at home. There's been a lot of attention given to the McClure-Andrus Wilderness Settlement Bill.
I've heard.
Yes, I'm sure you have. And I've asked Governor Andrus the same questions to you, and he indicated that he was optimistic that it would pass the Senate but would have difficulty in the House. Can you bring us up to date on what the status of the bill is?
You see, Cease is copping out because I said, I'll pass it in the Senate, you get it passed in the House. Now, I'm going to carry out my part of that bargain. Where's he? I'm only joking because I think his assessment is correct. I think we can, because the different dynamics within the Senate, we have a better chance of passing the bill in the Senate. The House is going to be much more difficult because the political dynamics of the House are different. But I think we have to try. I do want people to understand that we're not going to accept wholesale change to that bill and accept the result just in order to get a bill passed. That would not be good for Idaho, and it wouldn't be responsible leadership on our part.
Thank you. Janelle Berg.
Senator McClure, as a United States Senator, you've had many opportunities to make a positive contribution to our country. What do you feel are the most significant contributions that you've had an opportunity to make over the years?
You know,
that's a very hard question, I know.
Well, there are a flood of memories, reminiscences, things that I think of that have happened. You know, some time ago somebody said, well, what did you take the greatest satisfaction from in something you did? I remember very early as a young congressman, I learned a valuable lesson. A widow lady down on the Clearwater River was having trouble getting a Social Security claim, and she'd been fussing with that for months. And we took a hold of that and were able to get that resolved, and a $2,800 check went to her, and it was the difference between abject poverty and the ability with some dignity to meet her own needs. It was a just result. And there have been hundreds of cases like that, and I guess I look at those little things in terms of personal satisfaction. I'm not saying that the most important things for the nation, but maybe there is something to be said for a nation that has the compassion and the ability to deal with individual problems, and that a nation can't be really truly great if it can't deal with those questions. I think too of a contribution that I've made, which is unique because I come from Idaho, which is a unique state. We have a wealth of natural resources on public lands. 2/3 of our state is owned by the federal government. As a result, our needs and our attitudes are shaped by that reality of our geography, of the distribution of our resources and opportunities. And I guess if I've made a unique contribution in the Congress, it is trying to get people that come from other states to understand that we have a particular reason to be involved in balanced and wise use of those resources in the myriad of the ways in which we use them, in ways that they can't understand in other states. It's a continuing challenge, and I won't tell you that that it's done. It's never done. I think I've done something with respect to the maintenance of a strong and vital economy in this country and a strong and vital international posture for this country. We haven't always been successful, but I do believe in both of those areas I have made significant contributions in the directions that we have taken as a country, and I think they've served our country very, very well.
Thank you.
Glenn Walker.
Well, Senator, you've certainly made a great contribution to Idaho politics. You've been in the Senate for 18 years and the House before that for 6 years. The State Senate, Payette County prosecutor. What's next?
Well, a lot of people are, as we're taping this show, asking, McClure, are you going to run again? And I have to tell you, the hardest decision that I made was not when I decided to run in the first place, but in facing what I do with the rest of my life. It's easy when you're young to look at the future and say there's a lot of it, it's unlimited, I can do lots of different things. As you get a little older, you begin to see those horizons shrinking because you know that they're more finite. I don't know where I'll be 5, 6 years from now. I know I have no desire to end up leaving Washington in a hearse. I have no desire to die in office. I have no intention of staying there beyond my physical and mental capacity to serve. So this decision this year has been a particularly difficult for Louise and for me, and we haven't yet made it.
I have to tell Glenn and the Senator, of course, we're taping this program early December, and it'll run the first week of January, so...
I may have made it by then.
Yes, I want the audience to know that it was pre-taped. A question that I'd like to get to, and it's a very serious problem, the whole issue of drugs, and there's been a lot of attention given to the drug problem in this country, but as we're taping this program, there are developments taking place in Colombia that are so serious, and just the day before we taped this program, a great tragedy in Colombia. Senator, could you give us some advice on how should we deal with that problem and the violence that's being perpetrated on those people by the drug pushers?
Well, the first thing we had to do as a society, and we have now done, overall, there is a consensus in this country that drug usage is bad for our society. It's no longer just a question of individual choice. It's no longer, as we did toy around for a lot of the time during the 1980s, in determining whether an individual's use of drugs was an individual decision and nobody else's business, that somehow drug use was benign but drug peddling was a crime. I've never believed that that would work, and I never believed that we would get close to solving the problem until we recognized that there were political, societal consequences to widespread individual choice. And so I think we have made that decision now. We recognize it. But we also have 25 or 26 million drug users in this country that have happened during this period of time of our ambivalence about our own national attitude. We couldn't begin to address the problem until we had reversed that societal attitude. I think we have now. Not everyone, but I think society as a whole recognizes what it is doing to us. And the justice of the complaints on the part of the Colombians that it is our consumption that's causing their problem. And they complain about that. They have a right to complain about that. At the same time, we can't just go into Colombia and solve their problem. They haven't asked us to. They've asked us not to. We have given them every bit of support that they have asked. And obviously they are a country racked by terrorism from those who profit greatly from the human misery that they peddle on our streets. Now, we should be ready to help in any way that they ask, but as long as there is a viable government in that country that is attempting to deal with that problem, it's our role to support their efforts, to be responsive to their pleas for help, but we can't take over the fight within their country. I think within our own country, the drug package, the direction that we're moving now, is the correct way for us to respond. You've got to have better law enforcement. You've got to strengthen local law enforcement. Remember that criminal law enforcement is primarily the responsibility of the states under our constitutional scheme, but the federal government can and should assist. We have to have more courts, more prosecutors. We've got to have the means by which, when the law enforcement does their job and brings a violator into the court can process them. And then we have to have a jail system that will incarcerate them. We don't have any of those in adequate numbers today. We have to build all of those. I think we also have to deal with this attitude on the part of too many of the courts that somehow the individual rights of criminals must be protected even at the expense of society. I remember my friend Senator Graham saying there's something wrong when across southern Texas the only air-conditioned room in the courthouse is the jail. We are spending too much money on meeting the so-called rights of the criminal and not paying enough attention to the rights of society.
Let's have a little second part to this question, and that is about the issue in Colombia. With your access to information that you do have, what are the chances that the government of Colombia will be able to successfully deal with the drug pushers in that country and the violence that's taking place?
Well, I salute the brave men and women in the government of Colombia and in the media in Colombia that stand up for law and order and the suppression of this activity inside Colombia. Will they be successful? I will say yes, because I know that they must be successful. They have to succeed. We cannot have the destruction of free democratic processes in a country like Colombia because of something that we caused without feeling personally involved in what happened to those people. How many of us individually could stand up to the terrorism of the kind that's being leveled against governmental figures in Colombia today? The systematic assassination of governmental figures and of media figures. I think that they deserve our support. I pray they will be successful. And I answered your question by saying I think they will be because I think they must be.
Thank you. Janelle Burke.
Since we've mentioned that this show is being taped, we can say that it's being taped on Pearl Harbor Day, which is in fact December 7th, and that turns our attention toward Japan. One of the issues facing our country today is foreign trade. What steps do you favor with regard to international trade, particularly with the country of Japan?
The Japanese people are very resourceful and capable. They have shown that already, and I think that's a given, and they are entitled to our respect, and they ought to have it. But having said that, I think we also must be much tougher in dealing with them than we have been. Yes, they have internal demands and political problems in their own country and in their own system, but I do believe we have not succeeded in getting them to move as far towards free and open exchange as we have a right to expect. I think our government must continue to do more. I know that our trade representatives have tried over the past. We've had some successes, some movement. More agricultural products are moving in, more wood products are moving in. We've had some success in the electronics area. If we lose in free and fair trade, it's because they do a better job. We can't complain about that. But if they succeed in doing things because of unfair activities, we do have a right to complain about it. I remember my first experience going down the Ginza in Tokyo and seeing cantaloupe packaged as individual jewels and selling for $35 a piece. I wanted to run right out and lease a 747 and fly them into Japan. I'd have retired as a millionaire. Of course, they wouldn't let us do that. But I do believe that we have to insist that if they want free access to our markets, they're going to have to give us free access to theirs. As a matter of fact, I would have taken rather dramatic action had I been in charge, and I'm not. I have no illusions about that. But I'd have set up an automobile inspection plant in Peoria, Illinois, and had one inspector inspect all of their shipments, and they couldn't have had a single automobile sold in the United States until it passed inspection, as one example.
A side part to that question also is ownership by foreign persons in the United States of real property and other property. What is your position on that?
The real evil that you point to is not their ownership of the real property. It is the fact that we have a deficit in our balance of payments or balance of trade chronically over a long period of time. Now that's going to transfer dollars to them. As long as we consume more from that they produce, instead of more than we sell to them, they're going to build up dollar balances. It would be even more destructive of us if they took those dollars and invested somewhere else. So even though we don't like the aspects of them coming back and buying up properties in our own country, That's a symptom of the problem, and that is not the problem itself. We've got to be able to balance our payments. I remember a suggestion made to me by J.R. Simplot some couple of 3 years ago. He said, in effect, it's simple. Just tell the Japanese they can't sell any more in this country than they buy from us, and let them figure out how to do it. Well, that may not be easy to implement, but he's dead right on the issue. It isn't just our problem to solve and to have them try to evade. Put the problem back on them to administer. They'll get it done. And if they want to sell another Toyota here, they got to buy something else from us. That would balance it pretty quickly.
Glenn Walker.
Senator, I think most people believe that if you do choose to run for re-election in 1990, that you're fairly safe. But nationally, Republicans did take a couple setbacks in a couple governor's races recently and a couple other races. What are your predictions for 1990?
Well, mathematically, the prospects for Republican control of the Senate are just as good as they were in 1980, when we did achieve control of the Senate. Now, I said mathematically because I think the economic and political context of the decision is quite different. We were in a national crisis in 1980 at the time of the election. Unemployment rates were high, interest rates were high, inflation rates were high. We were on the verge of economic collapse. And so people could vote and did vote for a change. We're doing pretty well today. Not perfectly, but doing pretty well. And the tendency at times when things are going pretty well is that the incumbents probably fare better in those elections than they do in times of stress. And so mathematically, I assume that it's is different than the political reality of the context of the election. I think any realistic prospect really looks more towards 92 than it does towards 90.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're out of time. And Senator McClure, on behalf of the panel and our staff, we express our appreciation for your being here, and we welcome you back and future reports between sessions of the Congress.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Senator James A. McClure, the senior senator from the state of Idaho. I know you've enjoyed our program, and I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.